Welcome to another reading roundup. I hope you guys have been doing pretty well since the last one. Green Day just came out with their album Saviors, and I've been really enjoying that. I don't know if any of you guys listen to them or not. So I got some books that I've read since the last time. I'll be making a second video about one of them because I've got a lot to say about one book, and I don't want to make this super long. I'm trying to make these videos not a million years long. It's not working. I'm sorry. First one that I read was Mr. Magic by Kiersten White. I've never heard of this author before this. The premise is that there was this TV show for children, and apparently it was one of the longest running TV shows in this universe, right? In the world of this book. And then tragedy happens on the set, so all the kids get sent home that were acting on the show, and the show gets canceled, and then the show also systematically starts getting rid of all of its copies of each episode, take it down from everywhere. They get rid of all trace of like whoever worked on the show, whether it was the crew or actors. So even though this show had been around for like 60-something years, started off as a radio show back in the 30s or something like that, now there's no trace of it. And that tragedy happens like in the early 90s, I think. And then cut to modern day, the people that were on that show are now adults, and they kind of have this reunion thing happen because there are these podcasters that want to interview them, and then there's hints that there's going to be a reboot. But then things don't end up being as they seem, and it's this really awesome horror mystery sort of novel. The main character does not remember actually ever being on this this show, and we kind of go through her journey trying to remember all that happened, and it is, oh man, it is eerie, it is creepy, it is atmospheric, tense. All the characters are great. Oh man, it's the way that things are revealed, the way that the pacing is. It's wonderfully written. It is, like just expertly crafted. Like this was very carefully written. I don't know how to explain it. Like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of care was put into this. And how she laid out the plot. Oh man. And one thing I really like about it too is that there are these snippets in between some chapters. It's kind of like internet postings or comments or forums. Like this one is written like a Wikipedia article. And then there's some of it's almost like a Reddit forum. And people are commenting, and people are like freaking out, like, how come nobody else remembers about this? And then other people comment, and then they're like, people are interacting with each other in funny ways. Like one person is freaking out about it, and they're like, oh, wasn't Ronald Reagan in it? And then somebody else like, oh, well, that makes sense because Ronald Reagan's family is into weird shit. Like, it is so realistic the way that she writes out the internet things. It's exactly how people comment on the internet and how people interact with each other on there. It is so funny. And so good, and it also adds to a lot of that mystery because you're even seeing like other people other than the people that were involved in the show. There's all these other people that remember it, but then they're like, how come I can't find anything about it? It's awesome. There's this whole one here where it's talking about this person posts, what's the weirdest myth you've ever heard about on a children's program? I'm talking Mr. Rogers was secretly a military assassin and always wore cardigans to cover his tattoos. And then someone's like, Tinky Winky was written to convince children that the gay lifestyle was acceptable. And person's just like, I'm gay and the sun 100% is a laughing baby. Everyone should try it. And then someone's like, I can't believe people watched Teletubbies and thought gay, not drugs. Oh man. And then it does go from that to eventually somebody starts talking about what happened on Mr. Magic, the titular TV show. Oh man, I love those snippets. Yeah, she nailed internet culture so perfectly in this. There's a lot of themes of cults, corruption, especially like the corruption of innocence and indoctrination, especially related to cults. The influence of media, the Mandela effect. I know a lot of people liken a lot of the internet parts to creepypasta, but I mean, in the realm of this novel, it wouldn't be creepypasta because it's true stuff, not fake. You know what I mean? So I think that's a little bit misleading. But yeah, I can see how, you know, Kiersten White was probably influenced by creepypasta for those internet snippets. And then there's also a lot of themes of memory and how memory can be unreliable. And, you know, I think it balances all these themes very well. And actually, at the end of the book, there's an acknowledgments page, and the author talks about her being Mormon in the past, and she's not anymore. And she even says, there's a whole world of pain and trauma and anger and loss, but also hope and strength and happiness and peace between those two sentences, where the two sentences being, yes, I was Mormon, no, I'm not anymore. So this book is a metaphor for her leaving Mormonism. It makes the book so much better knowing that. It was already a fantastic book, but knowing that there's a real life message behind that, and, you know, that she actually went through, well, she didn't go through the events of this novel, but she definitely experienced certain things that are parallels to this novel. It makes it so much more personal, much more emotionally investing. Oh man, like, fantastic. There's also a quote in here. One of my favorite lines that I have read in any book in a long time. It is on page 155, and it's a little bit past halfway down, and it says, "A man like mayonnaise in human form stalks toward them, eyes only on Jenny." And it's actually Jenny's husband, and that's the characters are meeting him for the first time. But just, a man like mayonnaise in human form is the fucking best line ever. I love that. Oh man, that made a huge impression on me for some reason. But yeah, I definitely rank this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. I might have ranked it higher than that, maybe like a full 5 out of 5 stars, but I don't know. I just remember there being a couple of scenes that I don't know, like, to me, I don't like giving out 5 out of 5s easily. Call me weird or call me harsh or something, but to me a book has to be like absolutely fantastic. Everything about it is 100%, like, you cannot make this any better for it to be 5 out of 5. To an extent, I guess there are 5 out of 5s that I have that there's also a lot of just personal influence on that 5 out of 5, but I think about other books that I've ranked 4.5 out of 5 that I liked better than this one. I don't know how to explain it, but that's why it's not 5 out of 5 for me, even though I just raved about, like, how, you know, how insanely amazing everything was crafted. I don't know. I gotta, maybe I'm weird. Next book that I read is the book I want to make another video about. It's called Where the Dead Wait by Wilkes. I cannot look at that author's name without thinking of Annie Wilkes from Misery by Stephen King. So yeah, this book, I've got a lot to say about it, and I don't want to make this video super long. I'm just going to give you the basic. It started out great, and there was a lot of great atmosphere, and there's some fantastic writing in here. And there's even a lot of great scenes throughout it. But some aspects of the story, when I got thinking about it, once I get around like the halfway point, even things that are introduced in the beginning, I'm like, wait, why? That doesn't really make sense. One of those big things is the premise is that there was this group of explorers that went on an Arctic expedition in the 1840s or something like that. And they ended up being stranded for a while. They were icebound. They ran out of rations, they were going hungry, they started resorting to cannibalism, just like every other Arctic or survival horror or survival tale usually ends up being about, you know what I mean? And it doesn't really go to new territories there, but they end up getting rescued, except for one of the people, Stevens, is left behind, because he was on a hunting excursion when they got picked up. for some reason they didn't wait for him. Why would they have just left him? I don't know. Later on, there's another expedition to go back to try to rescue him, and it's like 13 years later or something like that. It's like, okay, realistically, the guy's probably dead. If, you know, it's an Arctic wasteland, there's no other humans around there for like the 3 or so years that they were stranded there, and almost no animals to hunt. So, I mean, like, how the hell is he gonna be survived for 13 years? But, you know, oh well. So they go back on a later expedition and try to retrieve him. I don't know, just a lot about that is a little bit like, really? Wouldn't be too big of an issue. If the story's good enough, you can definitely suspend disbelief on little nitpicks like that. And I would definitely call those aspects a little bit nitpicks. I mean, you gotta find a way to bring your characters back there if you really need to do that, you know. So the premise being that he's stranded there, you need to get them back there to discover more stuff. I get that. Doesn't always have to be the most solid way. It's fine enough in the realm of a fiction story. It's just the book I ended up not really liking too much after everything was said and done, so it just kind of adds to that, I guess. One thing that the book does is it goes back and forth between these two expeditions, and I don't really mind books that go back and forth like that, but the thing is that a lot of times when they go back to the original expedition, the author just keeps talking about the same few events over and over again, and a lot of times doesn't really offer any new information, and I get it. The main character, Day, Captain Day, is haunted by a lot of the stuff that happens, and he wishes he could have done stuff a lot better. And so part of that is kind of him thinking about it again. But, like, it gets so repetitive after a while. And like I said, it wouldn't be so bad if it had some relevance to the current expedition going on, but a lot of times it doesn't. And there's only a couple times where it actually does relate to the current expedition, and sometimes when it actually adds more information to move things along or to reveal more about some of the mystery, I guess. Throughout the book, you think that Day's going to get better as a character because he kind of starts off very self-conscious about a lot of stuff, even though this is the second time he's the captain. Like in the first expedition, he didn't start out as captain, he was the second ranking officer, but you know, the captain ends up dying from scurvy, so he becomes the new captain. And then the second time that he's going out to the expedition, he's the captain right off the bat this time. So, you know, you'd think he'd start to give a little bit of an air of an authority. You know, he's been with the Admiralty for his whole life, you know. But, like, he just acts so weak, and I feel like his character development does not really show much growth, even towards the end of the book. So that's kind of disappointing. I just don't think he's that great of a character. He's got the potential of being a great character, and I don't think the author does that justice. And obviously with all these videos, I'm not going to give any spoilers. When I do my video talking about just this book and more of my thoughts on it, that will be a spoiler video, and I will put that in the title. I will let you guys know. But for this, no spoilers. The ending was very weak. I didn't like the ending. I thought I know what the author was going for, but the way that she did it makes no sense. And that's kind of a theme with a lot of parts of this book. I would have DNF'd this book, but a lot of the problems that when I started to realize a lot of the flaws I had with it and kind of realized, like, oh, I don't really know if I'm going to like this, I was already I was already at least about halfway through the book that when I started to think that kind of stuff, and then I was like already probably close to 70% of the way through the book when I'm like, yeah, oh man, this is really just going in a crappy direction. At that point, I'm like, maybe the ending will redeem it. I don't know. It bills itself as a gothic polar story, like as in like the North Pole sort of polar. Like a gothic story set in the Arctic. I don't get anywhere where it's gothic. I'm sure that the author loves gothic stories and wants that to be a gothic story, I guess. There's nothing gothic about it. maybe you could say the seance scenes are kind of gothic, because seances are in a lot of gothic stories. But again, they're such irrelevant pieces. Like, there's such irrelevant scenes in the book that you cannot call it gothic because of those. There's nothing gothic about it. It's just an Arctic survival horror. And even then, it's more of just a regular survival story that's trying so hard to be horror. And just read The Terror if you're into this sort of survival horror. Also, just read Endurance, the real-life story of Ernest Shackleton and his ship when they were trying to find the Northwest Passage, I think it was. That's a non-fiction book, and it's not horror or anything like that, but it is very interesting. That is a very good book. So if you're into Arctic expedition exploration stories, just read those two. Alright, I think I've already talked more about this book than I was meaning to in this video. Watch out for another video where I talk more in depth about everything. And with spoilers, so I can actually talk about some of the, the nitty-gritty of why a lot of shit don't make sense. Next book that I actually DNF'd this book, Mr. Lullaby by J.H. Markert. I was really excited to read this book because the premise sounded really good. It's basically about coma patients being linked through this otherworldly plane, I guess, and someone is going around and systematically killing all these coma patients. A lot of people have likened it to Stephen King, and I think they've compared it to the novel It. I can't remember what other there was another novel that a lot of people were comparing it to as well. I think it ends up being like this one town ends up trying to protect this one coma patient from the guy that's going around killing everybody. I don't know. It sounded like a really interesting concept, a really fresh concept, and I'd also heard from a lot of people that have read it that it's like really creepy, really scary. So yeah, sounded like something totally up my alley, and I got a third through the book before I rage quit it. Like, it wasn't like a thing where I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. This was like I cannot fucking stand this. And I will tell you why. So, one thing I wonder about why they're saying that it's a lot like Stephen King books is that there's a lot of Stephen King books that we follow a shit ton of characters, right? You got Salem's Lot, you got The Stand, you got It, among others, where there's just so many characters that in Salem's Lot we follow the entire frickin' town of Salem's Lot. In The Stand we follow like an entire nation of characters just about surviving the super flu. In It we go through a lot of the all the kids that are part of the Losers Club, but then we also go through we see things from the perspective of a lot of other people around town, a lot of people like the bullies and stuff, like so many characters. And the question is, how is Stephen King able to get us to care about all these characters and balance all these characters in such a great way? What he does is when he introduces a character, he lets us spend enough time with them to get to know them, to care about them. And there's also usually like one or two pretty much main characters that he comes back to a lot. And Stephen King is really good about creating characters that we care about, So he doesn't just give us a few sentences about this one character and then move on to somebody else, right? We spend a chapter, like a good chunk of chapter with one character before we move on to the next one. What J.H. Markert does in this novel is he tries to introduce us to every fucking character right off the bat at breakneck speed before we even know what the hell is even going on in the scene. And he just info dumps all these characters all at once. He just names off all these characters. It's like, calm down. Because each chapter is really quick. He's going at really fast speed. Now, I like a fast-paced novel, but like, yeah, he introduces Simple Simon, and it's like, all right, so there's this guy. He's pretty dumb. He's not very smart. He's really good at art. Okay, now we're talking about Beth. Okay, so she's a deputy in this town, and she is. Okay, so now we're moving on to Gideon. Only thing I know about Beth is that she's a deputy at this point. Okay, so he is a veteran in the army that just came back home because he had a Purple Heart. Wonder what he did to get that. Okay, now we're talking about Beth again. All right, and so she's got a kid. Okay, that's cool, and she's investigating these men. Okay, now we're talking about I can't remember what the guy's name is, but he's basically the villain, the guy that's going around killing everybody in the comas. And then I think he's the one that gets the most actually real description, because we start to like hear about his childhood, growing up with a very religious mother where he's like kind of more into the devil and stuff like that, learning about him talking to the seashell that talks back to him and tells him to kill these people. And now we're talking about Gideon again. Okay, so, he's got a beard and he's pretty strong. Okay, now we're talking about... It's literally that. Like, you get so little information about all these characters, and before you can even start to give a shit about anything about these characters, we're already moved on to the next scene. And I figured like, oh, maybe this will taper out a little bit. No, it doesn't. And looking on reviews, it never tapers out. People are saying that that is constantly a thing up until the end. He even starts going back and forth between time periods. It's just severely bloated. Just not only with all the characters, but like there's also right off the bat. Okay, yeah, there's this guy going around killing people's in comas, but then there's also a horseshoe. I'm not going to say that name because of the YouTube transcript, but not that I monetize my videos, but there's basically this guy, and that goes around and does things to women and kills them, and leaves a rusty horseshoe at all their things. So he's a serial killer, and then there's also potentially another serial killer that's going around. That's all that one of the crime scenes seems like it is of that horseshoe killer and another killer, because the two MOs are completely different. So not only do we have a million fucking characters, but then we've also got what, 3 killers going around. Like, you gotta calm down. This is not a 300-page story. You crammed a 1,000-page novel into a 300-page novel. Like. Yeah, I could not. It was giving me literary whiplash, and yeah, it feels like the author was trying to rush through every scene so he could get to the next one, just to rush through that scene to get to the next one. Oh my gosh, I could not stand it. And also, from what I've read about a lot of reviews, is that the ending leaves a lot of questions. A lot of people wonder if that's because he wants to leave it open for a sequel, but then there's also a lot of other people saying that even in that case, there's still a lot of other characters that are like, whatever happened to them? They just kind of disappeared in the last third act, in the third act. So, I don't think it's worth it for me to ever revisit this novel to try to finish reading it, because I was at first thinking, because I was listening to the audiobook, and I was thinking, maybe I just need to read the physical copy, that way I can, like, see all the names, and I don't know. Something about that, reading the page and being able to like take your time that way, sounds like it might be easier to keep up with, because I was keeping up with it as much as I could, right? I wasn't ever like confused. It was just, I don't care about these characters because I'm not spending enough time with them, really. And and I'm not going to go through that whole back and forth thing for 300 pages with the hopes that I do end up caring about these characters. But I don't know, just with everything else, I don't think I'm ever going to try to finish this story. I don't really see... Everyone says that it's written like a Stephen King novel, and it's like, yeah, maybe... Even when Stephen King was on cocaine, he didn't write fast speeds like that, He didn't write quick scenes like that, you know what I mean? So I can't even say, yeah, maybe Stephen King on crack, because he Autonomy Knockers, he was at the height of his cocaine, and that went by super slowly. I can see like some of the concepts of like the coma and the guy that's killing all the people in the comas. That kind of sounds like it could be a Stephen King novel. The writing though, nothing like that. They're literally just using Stephen King's name to try to pull people in, and unfortunately, it's working for a lot of people. I won't say that there's no appeal to that for me. But I mean, there's a lot of horror books that they try to say like, oh yeah, if you're a fan of Stephen King, you like this, because a lot of critics seem to think that if you like Stephen King, then you like any horror. So I mean, that wasn't really a big thing, but like I did hear a lot of people saying like this guy's going to be the next Stephen King. So it's like that coupled with the fact that it sounds like a great premise, that sounds very promising. Unfortunately, I was highly disappointed. Let's go on to the next book. I think I'm already going longer than I meant to be. Next book is Where He Can't Find You by Darcy Coates. So, the same night that I DNF'd Mr. Lullaby, I started reading this, and oh my gosh, it was so much better. Just right off the bat, because another thing too is everybody was saying how creepy Mr. Lullaby was, and there was some gruesome scenes already that I read, but I think because all the scenes were so quick and I just didn't give a shit about anything or anyone, it just got rid of all of the creepiness. Like Joe Hill, Stephen King's son, he talks about how a lot of horror is effective because of sympathy. Because you feel sympathy for the characters of the stuff that's happening, right? That's why Friday the 13th, as much as I love those movies, they're also never considered good movies because we don't care about the characters. That's literally just, you're just seeing the creative kills, right? But in a good horror thing, you are going to care about the characters, and that's why the horror is so effective. I definitely agree with that. Where He Can't Find You, right off the bat, we're, learning about these characters, and the characters are like seniors in high school, and they feel very realistic. They feel very three-dimensional right off the bat. I grew attached to them pretty quickly. And there's also, pretty quickly into it, there's already a lot of creepy stuff happening. And this one is about, there's a serial killer called the Stitcher that has been terrorizing this town for almost 100 years, which makes people think that it's either somebody that started up back in the 30s when it was still a mining town, because that's when the first disappearances started happening. And then like later on, there's either copycats or like family members took up the mantle in some like fucked up generational tradition, I guess. And then other people think that it's a supernatural creature that's just been there for 100 years. And then like kind of going along with the supernatural is seems like every time somebody's about to go missing, a lot of the technology around the town goes on the fritz and all this other weird stuff. And what the Stitcher does, he kidnaps people, doesn't always kill them right away, and doesn't always keep to the same schedule, I guess. I don't know how to explain. Sometimes he'll have them for days before he kills them and leaves their body somewhere. Sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's years, and then there's some people that they've never found. And basically, when the bodies are found, it's usually more than one body, and they're stitched together in weird, unnatural ways. And dismembered and put back together in weird caricatures of people, I guess. Really creepy concept. Kind of sounds like a supernatural Ed Gein or something like that. Now let's say supernatural because of all like that, all the Fritz stuff. Whether or not it is supernatural, you got to read the book to find out. And I don't know, like it actually does. The book itself kind of feels like if Stephen King wrote Stranger Things and was inspired by Ed Gein for his villain, I guess, And yes, I'm doing that thing where I'm bringing up Stephen King's name for another horror author. This time it's actually warranted, though, because this actually does feel more like in the vein of Stephen King, so much more so than Mr. Lullaby. But it still feels like its own thing, obviously, too. But, it's one of the things is that, the characters are so realistic and so good, just like Stephen King novels. And that's one of the biggest things that makes Stephen King novels that Stephen King brand, I guess, is how good and realistic the characters are. A lot of people don't seem to pick up on that. Even Stephen King has said that his stories, he doesn't really follow the plot as much as he follows the characters. He creates characters, and then he wants to see what happens to them. He wants to follow them. sometimes he's got a concept of the story, and sometimes he just has the concept of the characters before he even starts. He's not really somebody that outlines his stories ahead of time. But so some people don't seem to think of it. Maybe some people just don't really think of it at all. But if you actually look at it, almost every single Stephen King book is character driven, not story driven. Some people seem to think that it's story driven, and I don't think they're really looking into it that well. Where You Can't Find You is another one. It's very character driven. Yes, there's plot, just like in a Stephen King novel. And maybe, I don't know if Darcy Coates outlines her stuff before she writes them or not. This was the first Darcy Coates novel that I've ever read, so. But I was really impressed with this, so I'll definitely check out more of her stuff. But yeah, like, we literally follow these high schoolers, especially Abby Ward, and see everything from them, and we watch them grow during it as well. We watch them overcome these adversities, all these odds. It's kind of a coming of age in a way. I guess for a coming of age, we'd have to really see them grow up over time. This is only like one small era of their life. I don't even know if it takes place throughout a whole month or something, but yeah. We do see these kids evolve throughout the story, and they're dealing with all this really fucked up shit. The town itself, it's like this weird town feels like it could be something out of the Twilight Zone, because the town itself is very odd. A lot of people refuse to talk about the Stitcher, even though it's clear that it runs everybody's lives. There's a curfew because all the kidnappings happen at nighttime, and there's all these other things in place, like nobody will, unless they have to, nobody will go outside alone, no matter what time of day it is. So even though a lot of them try to ignore about the whole Stitcher thing, it runs their whole lives every single day, you know what I mean? And it's this weird, it's not really a conspiracy, but it's just this weird unspoken, bond in a fucked up way throughout this entire town, and it's very unsettling. It just makes the entire book like so atmospheric, and that whole town thing too kind of makes me think of a lot of other Stephen King books as well. You know what I mean? There's definitely some like Lovecraftian vibes in here too. Some of them, if I say why, would kind of spoil it, so I won't say, but even like the weird technology stuff, there's something about that feels a little bit like cosmic horror. The whole town being connected, you know what I mean, in that way. And, like a lot of the people in town have basically stopped driving cars, because even cars go on the fritz and will stop working. So like people will bike everywhere, and it's just thought of as normal. I don't know, something about that. That doesn't really feel like H.P. Lovecraft. But at the same time, it kind of feels cosmic in some weird way. Like, all these people are like a part of this bigger thing they don't understand. You know what I mean? The detail in this book was fantastic, It's a lot of really gruesome scenes, a lot of really haunting imagery. It's effectively creepy and eerie throughout the entire book. I've seen it described as a young adult book, and I don't know if that really gives it justice, because I know a lot of young adult, there's overlap between young adult and adult books, right? Because a lot of young adult can deal with a lot of mature themes, can deal with a lot of heavy stuff that, there's definitely some young adult that's kind of like, how is this young adult again? But, so, young adult is one of those genres, it's kind of really hard to actually pinpoint what makes it what it is. And I guess I can see this being a young adult, kind of. But part of me wonders if the only reason why it's billed as that is because the main characters are in high school. But it's like, well, so is Carrie by Stephen King, and it has to deal with children. Those aren't young adult books, you know what I mean? And this, to me, this doesn't feel like a young adult book. So if anybody sees that tag and is like, oh, I don't know if I want to read this because it's probably not scary or it's probably not gory, ignore that tag because it is very creepy and it is very gory and is very gruesome at times. It does not shy away from the uglier details. That being said, I do wish that there was some more done with, because there are times where we find that we're seeing crime scenes of the body arrangements left by the stitcher, right? And some of them are described in pretty good detail, but like some others are just kind of vaguely like, oh yeah, they found a body, people stitch together. I think it would have been really cool to see more done with that. Like if the author, if Darcy Coates was really creative on some of the body arrangements, you know what I mean? Like it could be really cool to see increasingly creative human sculptures in that sort of way. You know what I mean? That's the only thing that I wish was more, that we saw more of. But that's not really a big thing either. There's also a point in the story where, because the new girl in town, who meets these main characters, this group of friends, her dad is a police officer and he just got transferred into that town. And there's like one point later on in the story where they're preparing for like a confrontation with the villain, right? And she's taking supplies from her house, and her dad ends up being wise to it. You know, he's like, well, why are you taking this and taking that? And then she's like, well, you just gotta trust me, I'm trying to help out a friend. And at first he's kind of like, you know, like, no, just keep out of that shit. But then he starts to get a little bit like weirdly willing to be like, okay, fine, I trust you, tell me what I can do to help, you know what I mean? But going back to that thing I said about you can suspend disbelief on some things that are possible but not really plausible. But if the story is good enough, you know, it's really not that big of a deal. That's a good example where, like, is that really super realistic? Probably not. It's possible. It's definitely shown that earlier in the book that there is a level of trust between the father and the daughter, and that kind of bond. So it's not completely out of left field either. So within the realm of this book, within the realm of that relationship, you know, I can definitely accept it. It's just one of those things like, doesn't ruin it though. I can suspend disbelief pretty easily because everything else about the book is so fucking good. You know what I mean? And yeah, highly enjoyed it. I don't know if I will rate this a full 5 out of 5 on later reads. Again, going back to, yeah, I'm weird. Some people, someone I know keeps getting mad at me whenever I rate something 4.5. They're like, just give it a 5 out of 5 if you loved it that much. But that's what I'm giving this one. Is I'm also giving this one a 4.5 out of 5. You know, just probably it'd be a 5 out of 5 if I saw more of those body arrangement, creative human sculpture things like I like to see more of. Again, it's not really a necessary thing, so maybe that's a little unfair. Highly recommend Where He Can't Find You by Darcy Coates, and I really can't wait to read more stuff about her. So that's the end of my reading roundup for now. Yeah, so a couple of really good ones and a couple of really bad ones. Oh, I don't think I gave my rating for Where the Dead Wait. I gave it a 1.5 out of 5 stars. Because there were some parts about it that I liked. Some scenes are good. Just on the whole, everything, the way things go, it kind of takes away from a lot of those good scenes too. But at the same time, the writing in terms of the prose and stuff is good enough that I don't want to give it too low, so that's why I gave it 1.5. It's like in between bad and okay. Hope to catch you in the next video. Look out for my full review of Where the Dead Wait by Ali Wilkes, complete with spoilers, so I can really talk about everything. In that video, I might do like a 1/2 is spoiler free. Well, I think I talked about it enough in this one. I can just do a spoiler video without doing that. So, yeah. See you guys next time.